Welcome to AFO Wealth Management Forward, a podcast powered by Arrowroot Family Office that's at the intersection of accounting, wealth management, behavioral finance, technology, and entrepreneurship. We help accounting firms and financial advisors grow their practice by going beyond the numbers as we learn from industry leaders and subject matter experts to discover the secret to their success. A podcast that highlights everything from the transformative power of AI to embracing the human-first approach of behavioral finance to help you understand the psychological and emotional relationships to money and meaning. Here is your host, Rory Henry, Director at Arrowroot Family Office and author of Holistic Guide to Wealth Management.
Hi, my name is Rick Telberg for CPA Trendlines, and I'm here to introduce Rory Henry, the author and chief editor of Holistic Guide to Wealth Management, the new handbook for accountants, CPAs, enrolled agents, tax professionals who are interested in expanding services to their clients in the field of wealth management. Rory Henry is here with two of the guests who contributed to the book. Rory, thank you very much.
Yes. Well, thank you, Rick, for that introduction and for putting the book out there. Randy was one of the great contributors. And then I cited the work of Dr. Daniel Crosby, who's an author himself about behavioral finance. So I'm glad to have these two wonderful gentlemen on the discussion with us today. So I'll let you fade in the background, Rick. And first, let me introduce Dr. Daniel Crosby. He is the Chief Behavioral Officer over at Orion Advisor Solutions. He's also one of the leading minds when it comes to behavioral finance. And like I said, he's authored a couple books like The Soul of Wealth, as well as The Laws of Wealth and The Behavioral Investor. Dr. Daniel, welcome to the discussion here.
Rory, good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, it's always fun. I'm excited for you to share with our audience, some of the insights behind behavioral finance and the human first approach that we talk about. So let me introduce our next guest. He's my friend, Randy Johnston. He is leaders when it comes to fintech in the accounting space. We've talked about this end-to-end solution for a number of years here, Randy, and we finally put this into a book and really helping practitioners out there potentially expand their offering to include more future-facing services like holistic financial planning and wealth management. So thank you for joining the discussion today.
Yeah, pleased to be here, Rory, and with you, Daniel.
All right. So let's get started here, Daniel. I want you to have you touch on maybe for our audience, the foundations of behavioral finance and how, many of the leading advisors in the wealth space are moving towards, this human first approach to providing, better outcomes for clients.
Yeah, it's something that I love to talk about. If we look back at traditional econometric models, they were all sort of predicated on this idea that people were rational, that people made decisions that are in their best interest, and that they were utility maximizing. Anyone who's lived very much life can say that that's not true of themselves. Anyone who's observed other people living their lives can say it's not true of other people. And what we actually know is that it is perhaps least true of us when it comes to money. In my book, The Behavioral Investor, I cited fMRI research that looked at people. It exposed people to all types of different stimuli, all the really good stuff: sex, death, politics, religion, money. And it measured the excitatory power that these things had on our brain. And more than sex, more than death, more than politics or religion, money excites the mind. And so it gets us out of this place where we're acting in our own best interest, out of this place where we're acting rationally. And we can do some profoundly goofy stuff with our money. So behavioral finance is just trying to understand this human side of wealth and the way that the worlds of money and mind and meaning all intersect.
Yeah, and I cited in the book your research on how we can take a human first perspective or human first approach to really solving societal problems. Can you share with our audience the research of the Paris subway the graffiti in England? I think there's toys and hand soap in India. Can you share that research behind how we can kind of look at things differently?
Not my research, but I did cite it like you did, and it's really fascinating research. So yes, this world of behavioral science and behavioral economics, they applied it to all these interesting places to solve a host of problems. And I think the core the core conceit there is that if we can change our environment, we can change our lives. And I think that technology has a great deal to do there. One of my favorite examples that you just gave was with hand washing among children in India. You know, I have three young children, and trying to get them to wash their hands is a constant battle. And it is the cause of seven figures worth of death each year in India. And so it's a very high stakes thing to get Indian children to wash their hands. And so what they found was if you educate them, it doesn't do much, right? You can offer carrots and sticks and it doesn't do much. But what they did was they made clear soap and they embedded little toys, the cheap little toys within the clear soap. And so every time you wash your hands, you're getting just a little bit closer to this goal of yours. And so by aligning our understanding of human behavior with our understanding of the environment, we can bring about really dramatic change. And I think there's huge implications here. You know, I know Randy is a fintech expert. I work for a fintech company as well. And we can really change human behavior dramatically if we can change the inputs, if we can change the ecosystem. And I think that's been an overlooked. I think education has been the first line of defense for a very long time with respect to changing human behavior. And it's just not always the most powerful thing, right? If you look at something like, you know, a third of Americans are obese, and it's not because they don't know what to eat. You know, it's not because they think a donut is healthier than a piece of lean meat. It's because a donut tastes better than lean meat, right? We don't lack the understanding. We lack the environment and the application. So that environmental piece is just huge when it comes to shaping human behavior.
Yeah. Let me throw that over to Randy then, because technology does allow us to provide some of that environment. I know, Daniel, I think it was you that talked about the three E's of behavior change being that education, environment, and encouragement. And I think many practitioners out there, they have the education and they want to provide their knowledge to their clients out there. But also the encouragement aspect of it, we got to be those coaches to help make those necessary behavior changes. But I think I want Randy to touch on maybe the environment aspect and how technology is allowing us to create the right environment to make sure we can have those behavior changes.
Well, there's multiple factors contributing. Let's take about a 15-year window where we've been using smart devices because the smartphone revolution has changed accessibility to the technology and ease of use. It's also got a fair component of addictiveness to it. But in terms of our ability to interact with clients, we can set platforms and interactions there that become very seamless. So that device can actually be a lever, if you will, for the interaction. But just as important, it's a convenient way to perhaps do the education piece. If you think back over the last 10 to 15 years where web meetings have become pretty straightforward to create, and in fact, during the pandemic became the way of doing things, today, many of our clients are willing to consume video content or audio content on their mobile devices or occasionally on their computers, and streaming has become another way of doing things. So this technology lever is notable. And of course, we continue to see the shift in the way the platforms are being modified, the way they're being leveraged. It's an opportunity for all.
Yeah. And I want to talk about maybe the shifts in the profession, Randy, and have you touch on, the role of the accountant, which historically many have that stereotype of them being number crunchers, right? They do taxes and compliance work, but we're seeing this massive shift in being that strategic advisor, being that person who often leads that client relationship. I know a lot of the folks in our circles talk about accountants being that financial first responder. So you can talk about the evolving role of the accountants and really how technology is driving that shift.
Yeah. So on that point, Rory, really the differential that you're pointing to are what I would call the compliance services: tax, client accounting services, and audit. And, those services I think will continue to exist for some time to come. They are becoming more commoditized. On the other hand, I've been a proponent of advisory services for almost 30 years at this
Yeah.
point. Okay, a long time. And it's only become recently popular in the accounting profession. I have a somewhat different view of the world on advisory services than most. I believe it to be client centric and then business centric. So it's usually a personal plan followed by a business plan, and you have to keep the client front and center on all this. Further, advisory is forward looking, where compliance is backwards looking. And since I would say most clients of accounting firms in particular have had a relationship usually for tax or audit, it's always been backwards looking.
Yeah.
And even client accounting services tends to be a little backwards looking in today's environment. As Bernie Smith, who I consider to be the best KPI guy in the world, says, if you've built a dashboard and you're doing real time data, by the time you get that transaction in the system, it's already in the past. I feel like I'm in Lion King here, right?
Yeah.
It's in the past. So this tone of advisory is, in my mind, critically important because it is a relationship deal as opposed to a transactional deal. And, so much of business is unfortunately evolved over in the transactional approach, which I don't think is what most accountants historically have dealt in either. Most have been relational people.
Yeah. And I go back to the return on relationship that we talk about throughout the book. And let me then throw this over to Daniel, because I think the stereotypes for many of the public still are the advisor being a stock picker, or that they can somehow beat the market. And I know, as you lay out, really it's that holistic advisor and being that person who can just help people make those correct decisions in times of market volatility, for instance. So can you kind of give a brief overview of really how the profession has transformed from that stock picker, from the person who's trying to beat the market, to really that holistic advisor?
Yeah, it's interesting to hear Randy talking about
Yeah.
the commoditization of some of these compliance-based accounting practices, because you're seeing something very similar in wealth management, where I think ostensibly when people go hire a wealth manager or a financial advisor, they think that the primary value that they're going to derive from that relationship is that person's going to put them in sort of high flying, well chosen combination of assets. And look, there is some value to be had there, right? When you look at the meta-analysis of all the value that an advisor adds, that accounts for about 1/3 of 1% of value per year. But when you look at that same meta-analysis, there's about 8 times that much value in them being a decisional coach and a behavioral coach, and them keeping you from being your own worst enemy. There's a host of studies now. One of my favorites is out of Canada, and it
Yeah.
just looks at people who work with an advisor versus those who don't, and it finds that those who work with an advisor have materially more wealth. And other studies have shown that they also have better marriages. They have better marital communications. They're more prepared for an emergency. They're less stressed about retirement. So there is some value in call it asset allocation, stock picking, but it's not the primary value. So there's this really profound disconnect between what people think they ought to be getting, or what they think the value is, and what the value actually is. The value of an advisor is actually keeping you from 3 to 5 catastrophic screw
Yeah.
ups over the course of your investing lifetime. It's to keep you from selling out in March of 2009 or March of 2020. It's to keep you from investing in your son-in-law's, whatever business. It's these forks in the road where you need a trusted guide, that they tend to add the biggest value.
Yeah. Is it Charlie Munger that you cite, Daniel, that says, boring is beautiful, or talks about being consistently not stupid is much better than trying to be brilliant when it comes to the markets?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's go into, because I think I wanted to touch on how especially those in our audience, those accounting professionals, are really kind of uniquely positioned to facilitate these holistic financial planning conversations. I think I saw the stats, Daniel, that only or out of 79% of Americans who have the option of investing in a workplace retirement plan, only 41% opt to do so. I think 1 in 3 Americans have a diversified portfolio. And I know the accounting professionals, ones dealing with those small and medium-sized business owners, are really the ones that are like I said, the financial first responders. So I think they have an opportunity here to really drive the holistic planning conversation. Maybe kind of shift that question over to Randy.
Well, if that in fact is the case here, um, I do believe that they, as you say, can be the first responders. And Daniel, to your point, also about, having a long-term plan that you actually can execute and not make short-term mistakes, that's clearly an advisory role. Further, I don't believe that most investors actually understand the dollar economics to start with. Uh, I'll illustrate with something that I consider pretty trivial, but I cannot picture McDonald's billions and billions served. I just can't picture billions, and I'm a pretty literate numbers guy, right? But I can't see that one. And so when you consider what it takes to accomplish your financial goals over a long period of time, the very minimal pieces of having enough assets to be able to live life in a comfortable fashion and still accomplish goals, passing wealth to future generations, and so forth. Um, I just don't believe that the numbers actually help most people because they can't figure out what the numbers mean. So, on that light, um, I would go a little bit further down. It almost doesn't matter how much modeling you do. Now, I don't mind disclosing to the listeners in this case, I built some of my first um, trusts after using a modeling program that convinced me, yeah, based on where I was at, I better have a multi-trust structure. And that has served me well, but I would have been far better served if I could have found an advisor that was actually more concerned about watching what I was trying to do, rather than perhaps being transactional and being your stock picker, as you referred to earlier.
Yeah, let me throw that over to Daniel here. How do we get more people to have a holistic financial plan? Obviously, like I said, we're speaking to many of those CPAs and accounting professionals who deal with a lot of folks that have to file a tax return. But as the message in the book and I talk about, really we're on a pathway to have more people have that holistic financial plan. So, any insight there?
Yeah, I think when people experience a holistic financial plan,
Yeah.
that's going to be comprised of deep conversations about your goals, to Randy's point, about your values, about your priorities, about the things that you love, the people that you love. That is an organic process that resonates with most people in a way that talking about the return assumptions of equity and fixed income does not. So I think that when people experience holistic financial planning, they're going to love it, and they're going to be a little surprised, pleasantly surprised, because the number one fear, the number one reason people fail to present to the office of a financial advisor is a fear of judgment, or a fear of inadequacy, or a fear that this will all be over their head. And, maybe the particulars of putting together a portfolio are over the head of the layperson, but a conversation about what you love and how you want to live, and dreaming about your future, which is the bread and butter of creating a holistic financial plan, that's fun. And so I don't think we have to twist anyone's arm. I don't even think we especially need to educate people. I think we just need to have them experience it, and I think they're going to love it.
And so, Daniel, your point there, though, is that's my view of advisory. It is a conversation and it is a listening experience. And most accounting professionals are actually pretty good listeners.
Mhm.
They frequently have asked a very few pointed questions, frequently based very heavily in fact, and then listened. And, this whole structuring of what's important to you, that is a completely different experience. And because I wind up working in so many family office operations all over the country, I am amazed at the mismanagement that occurs in the family offices because the core values are not being followed. And it's really a sad thing because here are relatively well-positioned people of means often not getting enough guidance. They're getting the transactional side of things covered, but not the strategic things covered. So it's really a strategy versus tactic type of affair.
Yeah, it's the transactional versus the transformational type of engagement. And that goes back to the human first approach. And I think, Daniel, what we talk about is helping people align their values with their goals. Do you have any research here behind the values-based planning and the importance of how we can structure our engagements to uncover those values to help people make better decisions?
Yeah, lots. I have a couple of chapters on this in my new book, The Soul of Wealth, that you just finished. So thank you for
Yeah.
reading. But there's one chapter where it talks about people in goals-based portfolios. So these are simply portfolios that are tied back to a personal meaning, right? This is Daniel's retire to the Bahamas fund instead of, Daniel's fund ABC 123. And people in those, by one accounting, they were 10 times less likely to go to cash during a volatile market. They were twice as likely to save for retirement, and they had tended to have terminal balances that were quite a bit higher than their meaningless peers. There's research by the Clonces that I cite in the book as well that shows that when we can get people to visualize this, I talk about Michael Phelps, how he would close his eyes and visualize each of his races before he would swim them. And if we can get people to move beyond the sort of generic milk toast, telling of how they want to live their retirement years, and we can really get them excited and get them specific and get them granular about what they want that to look like, that leads to a great deal more savings and better investor behavior. So, hoping, dreaming, wishing, articulating these things is very much a material part of the financial planning process in a way that I think a lot of people don't appreciate, but really enjoy when they get there and they experience it.
Yeah. In the book, I cite the best hopes question, as well as a work by our friend, Professor Hal Hirschfield at UCLA. And, I had experience with one of our CPA partners where we're doing a retirement plan and we're getting very technical. And I told our CPA partner, ask him what his ideal future looks like. And we got to the point where he said he wants to have an RV, travel the country, and go to different national parks. And that conversation transformed the engagement. We started setting up a succession plan. We did the retirement planning. We started budgeting for him to be able to retire in 10 years. So it totally changes the engagement from one of a transaction to really helping people optimize where they want to go in life. All right, let's shift topics here. Let's talk about technology. I know I have a report in the docket that cited from Orion's latest findings that estate and tax planning are some of the more desired services among investors who currently not being offered by their advisors. Can you kind of talk about some of the findings from that study, Daniel, and how there's a great opportunity for the folks out there to fill that advisor gap when it comes to estate and tax planning?
Yeah, again, I think, we've talked a bit about the commoditization of sort of the basics of our two worlds, mine and Randy's. I think the good news is, AI is gonna hasten that. I think AI is gonna further that and hasten that commoditization, and people are gonna want more services and they're gonna want better services. And I think things like estate planning, again, this is a deeply human thing. This is the last words you say to your loved ones, is that's effectively what your estate plan is. And so it's no surprise that people of means care about this. And so I think I'm excited for the future because people already get so much value out of their advisory relationships. And I think we're just going to see more and more of that as the service offerings expand, as AI and technology make sort of the meat and potatoes of it easier and quicker.
Yeah, Randy, let me throw that over to you because as we talked about before, all these services in essence are interconnected, especially if you have a small business, exit planning, estate planning, that's working backwards. And then we can kind of make the decisions when it comes to our personal finances as well as our business in concert with each other to make sure that we're meeting those ends. So can you kind of talk about, the opportunity here to integrate some of these other services into a tax and accounting practice?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer the question, but I'm going to start off on a slightly different path to get there
Okay.
because the AI trends are going to continue for a while. They'll be accelerated with quantum computing, as I see it, possibly as early as within 3 years. And one of the key differences that our listeners, I'd like you to focus on right now is we have the generic large language model tools, the Chat GPTs, the Copilot 365s, the Claudes, the Perplexities, the Llamas and Groks and those types of platforms. But what will happen is wise developers and companies with vision are incorporating the AI models, the AI technology into their modeling capability. So whereas before the models were very mathematical, and they still can be to a degree, but when you can broaden the models to use AI technology, a lot of the soft factors start to come in. So, as this whole positioning, thinking about the holistic items, the transition of wealth that we're talking about here, the models are actually easier to develop and will be incorporated into the platforms. So the more we have clients that are doing all of the services that you'd mentioned, the succession planning, the estate planning, and so forth, those things can be modeled with the AI technology far better. I do see a number of the platforms in their development stages already. Further, many of what we'd consider transactional services in the past are becoming AI modified as well. So that is driving down the need for any outsourced labor to get this done. A good example there would be like Blackor Tax Autopilot, which does full 1040 preparation with no intervention, or additive AI that's pulling all of the K1 information in for business returns. And so where we used to have a lot of transactional work around that, that's all being extracted far better now than it was even 2 years ago. And I think you'll see even more changes in the next 2 years. So one final comment in this area, client expectations are radically increasing. And if we go back to my first comments about smartphone technology and so forth, the kind of in your pocket and expectations of fairly instantaneous responses, the expectations continue to rise. If we are using the right tools, I think we can rise to meet those expectations among the clients. And realistically, instead of worrying about the transactions, and I usually use the 80-20 rule here, too many accountants historically have been focusing on the mechanics, the compliance, the transactions, 80% of the time on the transactions, and 20% of the time thinking about the strategies. And the tools are flipping that right now, where all of that transactional stuff can be handled, and we can spend 80% of our time thinking about the strategies and working on the client relationships.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that, Daniel, as far as the client relationships go and how we can, dive deeper and be more strategic and build those plans really alongside those clients. But it's the deep work that we do with the human first approach is really finding out what matters most to them. So can you kind of talk about, ways in which we can better effectively work with clients and then get them to where they want to go based on, their personal matters, their business matters?
Yeah, so Accenture of all people, right, of all firms, came out with a finding a few years ago that found that among wealth management clients, the number one thing that their clients were looking from their relationship with an advisor was to be understood.
Yeah.
And that is something that has really, really stuck with me and something that I've really tried to incorporate into my work at Orion. So one of the things that we've done at Orion, we've developed a 20 question assessment of someone's sort of financial personality. It takes like under 3 minutes for them to complete this. They can then compare it with a loved one, with a grandchild, with a spouse, whoever, and show them across these sort of 5 dimensions of financial personality. Where are you? Where do you sit? Where does your loved one sit? So we had already kind of done this. Now, with the advent of AI, what we're now doing is baking this behavioral profile into the way that we report. So you can take someone's quarterly statement, you can take someone's, an advisor's preparation for a meeting, and you can personalize it to their specific communication style, their specific personality, and their specific needs, wants, wishes. And so it's a really, I think, beautiful and interesting coming together of the practical and the behavioral, right? I mean, like we're report well by DNA, we are a reporting software company, but you can take something that seems fairly standard, like reporting software, and you can make it deeply rich and deeply human. And I think that's what Randy was hinting at. I think you're going to see more and more of that. Things that have historically been sort of just, transactional or taken at face value.
They tell a story.
Yeah, these things we can use that data to tell a story and make them more human.
Yeah, and Daniel, as you were talking that through, I was thinking about the evolution, particularly in the e-commerce world, of the one-to-one transaction, a bespoke experience, if you will. And in effect, by providing the reports to fit the personality of the reader, that's a huge step forward. And by the way, I think that's an early huge step forward. I think it will become more refined over time. So just like it sounds like your team have taken the models and, laid the reporting over the top of that, what will happen is the AI capabilities will be able to surface more nuances. And, I've really come to conclude with my experience in dealing with people is it's not black and white. It's almost always gray. And it's these shades of gray that, trigger the way they think about things. And where we try to sometimes advisors try to compartmentalize too much instead of being a little more broad and listening to more of the attributes. And I believe that, I see tools today that can filter through much documentation and surface insights that when you see it, it's like, how did I miss that all these years? How did I miss that about this person? So I think you'll find that the more documentation, the more interactions that you have with clients, the more the AI will surface nuances that you might miss. Because as you were talking, Daniel, preparing for client meetings, which I'm thinking back through the years where I've helped firms optimize their preparation for those client meetings, they were doing the best they could with the tools of the time. And the fact of the matter is, the AI leverage, I believe, will be part of it. And frankly, just the interactivity, because I believe you'll find a lot of this reporting that you're doing will be tied back to the plan, not necessarily tied back to metrics and numbers, tied back to the plan, which, by the way, is the way a lot of business goals and personal goals work.
Yeah, I mean, I've been using some AI tools here and just throwing some dummy data as far as QuickBooks data, and it's analyzing, each of the transactions and giving insights. So I think we're getting to the point where it'll be able to analyze all the business data, analyze all the personal data, and then know the person's psychology stuff, the work that Daniel does, understanding the human, and then give potential avenues for them to go down. So we're in a fascinating time here. And I think having that human first approach that we talk about allows us to personalize advice. And once again, getting to people to where they want to go in life. Alrighty. I want to touch on healthy, wealthy, and wise, because I know you have some interesting stats, Daniel, on how being healthy can improve the amount of money that folks can make. Going to therapy as well. Some of the data behind that for men and women, I think it was 12.1% or something increase in annual earnings for men who go to therapy. So can you kind of talk about some of the research behind that and how you can earn more money when it comes to being healthy?
Yeah, so I wrote The Soul of Wealth. I mean, there was sort of a micro reason and a macro reason why I wrote it. The macro reason is that the world has never been richer,
Yeah.
and the world has also never been sadder. You know, when this country was founded, 85% of the world was living in poverty. Today, that's like 9%, which is still 9% too high, but it's an incredible, we've covered an incredible amount of ground in, 250 years. And so you would think that there would be all this human flourishing on the back of all this material prosperity, and you just haven't seen it. You know, the size of the American home has tripled post World War II, and people are just lonelier and sadder than they've ever been. So I wanted to think about help advisors think about ways they could take money and turn it into meaning and happiness. On a personal level, I had a health scare that ended up being nothing that I write about in the book. But for a few months there, I really thought I was sick. I really thought I had some sort of mysterious illness that was giving me a lot of pain. And there was this moment where I was driving to the hospital. My wife was driving me to the hospital, and I'm crying. I'm in a ton of pain. I'm in the front seat of my wife's car. And Rory, you know me. I love money. I think about money. I write about money. I invest money. I love money. And I would have given every penny I had for relief from the pain and for answers to my questions. And that's what put me on the path to write the book. When you start to look into it, though, it's really wild, because most people, when they think about maximizing their wealth, it's a big focus on externalities.
Yeah.
It's a big focus on what's the president gonna say, what's the Fed gonna do, what is some geopolitical,
Yeah.
kerfuffle how's that gonna shake out? And what we find is that it's really you are the engine of your wealth. And so you maximizing your own well-being and your own gifts and talents is the way for you to really stoke the fire of your wealth. So education is the number one predictor of wealth building potential. Like, go get all the education that you can, get those letters behind your name, get the extra course or the certificate. That's a big one. Therapy is huge, bigger for men than women, but big for both. 12% increase for men, 8% for women,
Yeah.
10% on average. People who go to therapy, we live in a knowledge work economy, we live in a relational economy. Compared to their same education peers, people who go to therapy do better than those who don't, because they learn the skills to manage their emotions, to interact with other
To
people.
communicate. Yeah.
Yeah, to communicate and to thrive. Also found that people who exercise make more money, and people who have a mentor, people who have someone who can give them that combination of support and critical feedback tend to have better careers than people who don't. So rather than trying to wring, that extra 1% of alpha out of the market, the best thing that you could do would be go talk to someone, hit the gym, you know, get in shape, take care of your mind, take care of your body, take care of your soul, your spirit too. So big stuff.
Yeah. Let me throw that over to Randy, because I know in the accounting profession, obviously we have a capacity issue. So having that mentorship program is big. And I know many folks out there, especially older folks, may have an aversion to therapy. So maybe have you comment on what Daniel said and the importance of being healthy, wealthy, and wise there.
Understood. And Daniel, I was admiring your, comment about the materiality and the reduction of poverty. Just to kind of put it in perspective, these larger homes that we've built is consuming all of the timber that we have here in the United States and Canada. So it's the homes and the contents. So reality is, if we had the same size homes we had in the past, we'd be net exporters of timber and lumber. Okay, just so you've got some perspective on the way that fits together. Now, um, Rory, in the accounting profession, there have been uh, programs discussed and promoted for some time, work-life balance. If we go back to that. And, if you look at multiple other people, most writers in this area say that there's 7 dimensions that you have to balance to have a balanced life. And, there's some variance on that, but I do understand that. Most of the accounting profession is, very hardworking, very smart. They're learners by doing, so they often set aside the other learning modalities. And, it is tough for them to do what Daniel might have recommended, the therapy. Only some actually even handle the exercise regimen that he was talking about. There are some, but many are so swamped with work that they're working extended hours at various periods, and frankly, probably almost too tired to go exercise. If you've just worked 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., you're just not exactly in the mode to go hit the gym type of problem. So, a lot of that was attempted to be solved by outsourcing. And, that's just moving the burden. It doesn't really solve the problem. So I am concerned for the profession also that we're going to lose a significant amount of the talent that has been the backbone of the accounting profession. The numbers are not a surprise. We knew this was coming. We've known it's been coming for 10 plus years. It was delayed a bit by the pandemic, where people, instead of retiring in the 18 to 22 timeframe, they continued to work because they were worried about a number of different factors. But the net here is the number of accounting professionals is going to decline. The amount of work that has to get done should decline. And we're in that period right now where it's shifting. About a 3 to 4 year period is where this is going to happen. So we're going to have to navigate this change in the accounting profession during this time frame. And by the way, it's happening to us in the accounting profession, but it's happening to all of your clients too. They are having to navigate a lot of these same resource constraints, people constraints, the rapid pace of learning, and so on. So I would like for our accountant listeners to consider, how do they take care of themselves, and what types of things really would benefit themselves and their clients when we're dealing with this. And that might mean changing the types of activities inside the personal lives and inside the business. And that's a tall order.
Yeah, it is a tall order. All right, gentlemen, this is great. I want to throw it over to Daniel for some final thoughts here for our audience.
Yeah, it's great to be in front of folks that care so much about the work that they do. I would just say, I borrow this from Jason Zweig all the time, to use the lessons of behavioral science as a mirror first, and then only as a window onto your client behavior secondarily, right? If you change yourself, if you improve yourself in the way you go to market and the way you deal with folks, I think that shines through and it does a lot of good. So for anyone interested in these ideas, I would commend you and just say this is where the puck is going.
Yeah.
And it can improve your ability to be a great parent, a great partner. It has holistic benefit.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Thank you so much, Daniel. Randy, final thoughts for our audience?
Well, again, I'm going to take a little different spin on this. Most accountants that I know love the profession of accounting, but many have burned out inappropriately. And I believe that if you would like to fall in love with accounting again, you've got to do the things that you like to do. And my suspicion is that for many accountants, having this advisory mentality is different enough, uses your skills levels better, that you can set aside some of the things that you've done traditionally if you'll take time to think about strategically where you would like your own life to go and where you would like your firm to go and how you would help clients. So earlier in our conversation, I suggested that you have to be client centric, doing a personal plan and then a business plan.
Yeah.
And before you can do that for others, you actually need to take a little bit of time doing it for yourself.
Yeah. The proof's in the pudding. I agree. Doing the work, the holistic financial plan yourself, and then if you read the book, you'll talk about the values-based exercise. We talked about the values-based exercises and the life planning. And once you do it on yourself, I think you can then transfer that over to your clients. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on this discussion today. I appreciate it. If people want to learn more about what you're doing, what's the best way to do so? Throw it to Daniel first.
Yeah, I'd love for folks to check out my book, The Soul of Wealth.
Yes.
And I have a podcast myself called Standard Deviations.
All right. Randy?
Well, too many websites, too many interests, but I have my K2 business, k2e.com, which has a lot of the content that we do for CPE for accountants. My NMGI business, which has been around 40 plus years, nmgi.com. And then personal stuff on me is randyjohnston.com with a T, not like the big unit picture, but Randy Johnston with a T. So you can find things on us there. And last but not least, Rory, I do write monthly columns for the CPA Practice Advisor and have weekly podcasts on technology. So if you're interested in almost anything, you may find we've already recorded a topic, or if you want one, you can ask for it. And if I've got the expertise, we'll create it.
I love it. I love it. We'll put all that stuff in the show notes. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Very good.
All opinions expressed by Rob Santos and Rory Henry on this website podcast interview are solely their opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Arrowroot Family Office LLC or their parent company or affiliates, and may have been previously disseminated on television, radio, internet, or another medium. You should not treat any opinion expressed by anyone as a specific inducement to make a particular investment or follow a particular strategy, but only as an expression of their opinions. Past performance is not indicative of future results.